in the last session, and we would look forward. And the grandma would start telling the story that there was a king who was very brave, conqueror. And the child listening to his, he would always ask, फिर क्या हुआ? कैसे हुआ? क्यों हुआ? I think this is the inborn. In social sciences, this questioning mode of learning and teaching is called critical pedagogy. Manifestation of critical pedagogy is reflected in the research methodology that stipulates that human thoughts and ideas progressively move and develop from thesis to antithesis, antithesis to synthesis, and so on and so forth. This is the way which we progress. There is no other way. There is no other. I was reading only the other day a beautiful article by a sociologist, Abhijit Pathak. He's a very distinguished teacher of sociology at JNU. Beautiful. Now he says, living in a society that loads free inquiry is reflecting upon the present scenario. In the present scenario, he says that we are not given to that kind of a setup, you see. He said this is something sad. And I believe that this capacity building program is a very critical step to move that objective. And he said, I quote, an environment that allows us to look at everything, be it science or religion, with freshness and openness. Hence, a creatively nuanced, critical, meditative thinking ought to be seen as a distinctive feature of a healthy and democratic society. It's a very important message. And I thought that it's important because capacity building program, when I was started reflecting upon it, and Sanjeev Kumar Singh has given me 2 months to reflect upon. I'm grateful to him because I just can't think that a telephone message is obtained. That's why we are having a workshop in 2 weeks, and we would like you to be a person or resource person at that workshop. He said, how can you do that? How can you do that? You can't simply, it's just something. Critical thinking in the Indian classical tradition is the very foundation of learning. It is most clearly and amply reflected in the 3 successive stages of learning. And those are faith, understanding, and realization. Faith, understanding, and realization. This is a part of the Indian classical tradition. I may share with you that I'm a part of this tradition because I received my education in the formative years, absolutely in an informal setup. My formal entry in the formal system of education was only at the stage of matriculation, where one can appear privately and be a part of it, you see. Earlier, I had the opportunity to interact and learn in a Gurukul. Who were my teachers? The Vanprasthis. Who were Vanprasthis? Those were the people who were enlightened, who have made mark in their life, and they wanted to share. There was no prescribed course structure, nothing others. How would they teach? Do you know? How would they teach? They would teach you through the mode of their own conduct. Through the mode of their own conduct. That was the. Yesterday, somebody sent me a good morning message. He said that with trust, even silence is understood. But without trust, every word is misunderstood. Trust is the soul of all relationships. I think it was so true. When I reflected upon the Gurukul education, I said, how my teacher would teach me. he would teach me the most complicated message in a most simple. And what is it? He would live by that precept. See, he would live by that precept. See, that was the emphasis. Now, this was my, as a resource persons, we are on trial. In the inaugural session, you have heard the three distinguished vice chancellors who are academicians in their own right, including an honorable judge of the High Court who delivered an inaugural address. But now the question is that for me as a resource person, well, all right, I can assume that you have a rounded view of the whole subject. You know the focus where we have to achieve. But nevertheless, the challenge before me is how innovative, through the exploration of one and the same thing, we are able to bring to the fore new and newer nuances that will fructify the capacity building of our young faculty. So this is the challenge for me, and you are the jurors on that count. Now, why the second reflective question? What is the seeming backdrop reference to considering the issue of access to justice in our contemporary legal pluralist social order? I repeat my question. What is the seeming backdrop reference to considering the issue of access to justice in our contemporary legal pluralist social order? Again, I pose this question to myself because Chanchal Singh has expected from me to do so. Do you know what is it? Any guess? Hold on your breath. Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav. The seeming backdrop reference. The most seeming backdrop reference is the celebration of 75 years of India's independence as Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav under our constitution. In the backdrop of 75 years experience, we need to explore and expound the concept of access to justice as an instrumentality of the state for the protection and promotion of legal pluralism as envisaged under our constitution. Exploration of the given theme, I try to put it in two parts, referring to respectively access to justice and second, legal pluralism. Now, this I have to do so because a week before my coming over here, Chanchal Singh informed me that, sir, you would be the first person to begin with the academic session. And second would be on the following day. I said, there will be 2 lectures on this thing. I really started perspiring. I was sharing only the other day. Is it I have barely prepared my lecture for the first session of duration of an hour and a half. And now he wants me to, it was a big challenge for me. But since the challenge came from the captain, you see, I must adhere to it. So therefore, I divided I said, first part, I would talk only about access to justice. And the second part, I would talk about pluralism. It is a difficult task, but then difficult task is to be handled. I can't run away. So the first part is exploration of the concept of access to justice. What is the generic notion of access to justice? Access to justice is a basic principle of the rule of law. This statement needs to be understood very clearly. If we miss this statement, probably we would miss the entire exploration. That access to justice is a basic principle of the rule of law. It is often invoked whenever there occurs a violation of the legal right. That is a right stated jurisprudentially. I'm quoting the definition of Salmond. A legal right is the one which is recognized and applied by the state in the administration of justice. This is the basic, because it was a distinct contribution of Salmond, because he was making a deviation from the Australian concept. Law is the command of a sovereign. So whatever is not commanded by sovereign is not law. So question arose, I was teaching at that time the customary law, is that what about the position of a custom? Because custom is not commanded by the sovereign, so therefore it is not law. But it falls clearly, categorically, in the definition given by Salmond. Is it any principle which is recognized and applied by the state in the administration of the state would get the status of a legal? Now, what is the constitutional exposition of access to justice? Access to justice instantly comes into play whenever there is a violation of a fundamental human rights guaranteed to all citizens under the Constitution, inasmuch as the Constitution itself alludes to it under Article 32 of the Constitution as a remedial fundamental right. What's the implication of a remedial fundamental right? A bare perusal of the provision of Article 32 reveals that access to justice means access to the Supreme Court, because the institution of court is a constitutionally recognized temple of justice. This constitution is. I have recently done it, a piece on Babri Masjid case. I explored this concept beautifully, but I do not have time to go into the intricacies. Perhaps if Chancellor Kumar Singh would ask me to deliver an independent lecture on it, I'll be very happy to do it, because I think I have done some work on it. And summation of the functional value of the concept of access to justice. It's an important observation. It makes the rule of law justifiable. Without it, the whole gamut of the human rights would remain inchoate, incomplete, imperfect, or merely a theoretical abstraction. A constitutional question of exploration is, now I'm using a question of constitutional exploration. What is the value of directive principles of state policy contained in Part 4 of the Constitution, which are categorically declared under Article 37, not enforceable in the court of law? It's a question. I have been teaching Constitution for a long number of years during the earlier part of my career, but somehow or other the perspective which Chancellor Kumar Singh has forced me to see through now, I did not have then. But then this is what I'm going to share with you. Article 37 I quote because this is very important. The provisions contained in this part 4, shall not be enforceable by any court, but the principles herein laid down are nevertheless fundamental in the governance of the country, and it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. I'm just quoting because through my mind, when I see in retrospection, I said, hitherto, till date, we have not understood the implication of this simple principle laid down in Article. Till date. It's a big claim, you see, that if you say that till date, 75 years. I take the telling example to illustrate my idea, which I have got in my mind, that exploration of constitutional question, I take the provision of similar provision of education under Article 45 of the Constitution. I am referring to Article 45 as originally contained. Subsequently, it was modified. Unfortunately, I would say, unfortunately, they have downplayed the value of Article 45. Downplayed the value. Article 45. Let's engage ourselves for a moment in the exercise. Article 45 says that state shall endeavor to provide within a period of 10 years from the commencement of this constitution for free and compulsory education for all children until they complete the age of 14 years. What does it reveal in respect of education? I'll put it. Now, I have culled out my understanding that this is what it says. First, to provide education shall be the prime responsibility of the state. To provide education, how do you infer from the statement given? Do you find any word which says that it is the prime responsibility of the state? You see, it shall be that. Shall is the commandment of the Constitution to the state. Shall endeavor to provide. What do you mean endeavor? कोशिश कर. What do you mean by कोशिश कर? Endeavor. स्टेट का कोशिश कर तो रहे हैं हम और क्या चाहते हैं? No. Have you been seeing the program on national TV at 2:30 from Monday to Friday? I'm very fond of. I'm seeing that program regularly on national TV. कोशिश से कामयाबी तक. Have you seen any one of them? Please do see. It's an eye opener. कोशिश से कामयाबी तक. Here the persons from the various walks of life, majority come from the film industry, maybe a singer, composer, director, actor, or in any other designer. They are brought. And how they started building up, making an endeavor, and they kept on endeavoring till they succeed. Till they succeed. That is the purpose of, and this is the whole purpose of education. This is the whole purpose of capacity building. You see, I often wonder that what makes a scientist to repeat an experiment 1,000 times, despite of the failure of 1,000 times? What is that which keeps him? Because in his imagination, he has seen the truth. It lies here. But how to reach that truth? He's making that up. He's taking it. So, state has to make an every attempt till it succeeds. So, therefore, it is the prime responsibility of the state shall endeavor to provide free and compulsory education within a stipulated. So, this is for that it is the provide the education is the prime responsibility of the state. Shall, you are very rightly said, because shall, when it used with third person, not simply will. If it would have been will, it would have been means only a future that state will. State shall is the commandment of the Constitution, and Constitution is supreme, nobody can. Second, this responsibility shall be discharged within a stipulated period. What is that stipulated period? 10 years from the commencement of the Constitution. What is the significance of the term within a period of 10 years? That is the crux. Within a period of 10 years. Not merely in a period of 10 years. Not merely the state will make an endeavor, state shall make an endeavor. It has to be accomplished within a period of 10 years. In a period, it carries a very sanctified meaning, and that is 10 years is an outside limit. 10 years is an outside limit. So you have to finish If you can finish in 9 years, if you can finish in 8 years, if you can finish in 7 years, wonderful. But 10 years is the outer. Third, education shall be free and compulsory. I think this is the concept which has not been understood till today. Just be free and compulsory. That is, it is not a cerebral commodity. Education is not a cerebral commodity. Education is not a cerebral commodity. I will come back to this point later. Fourth, all this shall be accomplished by the state through the enactment of a proper law. There it is written in Article 45. It is written anywhere in 45 article that if the state want to do it, the state must enact a proper law. This is a fundamental principle of constitutionalism. Constitutionalism, a system of governance in which the sovereignty lies in the constitution, not in the parliament, not in the executive government, not in the executive government and parliament together, not even in the Supreme Court. Supreme Court is supreme, but it is not sovereign. Supreme Court is supreme, but it is not sovereign. So this is a fundamental principle that Constitution laid down the foundational principle in a most generic sense. And those principles are to be successively crystallized. As a student of jurisprudence, we have been calling Constitution as a grand norm. It's a grand norm. And then this grand norm is to be crystallized. Parliament would make the law. Under the law, regulations are made. Under the regulation, rules are made. Under the rules, licenses would be issued to carry forward. So this is the, so therefore, whatever is to be done to education, it has to be done by enacting a proper. Education, I have posed a question. How do we sum up? How do we sum up all this what I have said? How do we sum up all this? I have summed up by saying that education represents, seemingly by all accounts, a very well recognized and established strategy, tool, or a contrivance that can bear the burden of resolving all sorts of complex issues or problems, social, economic, and political, and that too with a futuristic input, and its implementation works no delay. And this is the meaning, this is the spirit with which Article 45 is invested. Now, from where we get this spirit? In order to understand this spirit, you have to go to the history of freedom struggle. You have to go to the history of freedom struggle. Remember Tilak, 1857, who said, Swadhinta hamara janam siddha adhikar. What did he do? He made education as the tool of change, revolutionary change. And that's why, by the British government, he was labeled as the most dangerous enemy of the British Empire. Most dangerous enemy of British Empire. What he was doing? He has got no power. He was no power to make bombs, you see, or overthrow the government. No, he took the most important critical factor, that is education. So Article 45 is to be read with this spirit. That's what I said. How do you sum up? Summation is that solution to all problems, social, economic, political, and using the constitution phraseology, lies in education. But what happened? I posed a question. What did we do with constitutional mandate of Article 40? I posed it. Nothing happened substantially for about next 50, 60 years since the commencement of the Constitution in 1950. And the citizens had no power to force the state to fulfill its obligation under Article 45. Why? because containing non-enforceable, unlike fundamental. So this was the kind of an understanding of the constitutional provision, and this kind of an understanding remained with us for next 50, 60 years. कि कुछ भी नहीं करा. Can you imagine? Nothing happened for 50, 60 years actually. And then came the judicial fiat or the strategy of empowerment by transforming the state obligation into the fundamental right of children. The Supreme Court, through constitutional interpretation, read the obligation of the state to provide free and compulsory education to all children within the ambit of fundamental rights contained in Article 21, which guarantees all citizens protection of life and personal liberty by ingeniously holding that the term life means life with dignity. And that comes only with the provision of education as envisaged under Article 45 of the Constitution. Now, this linkage for the first time was done in Unikrishnan case. I was having a brief conversation with Chanchal Kumar Singh, but only very briefly, because he has done a good work on it and he is still pursuing. He was directly against Unikrishnan, right? See? So I said, Mr. Chanchal Singh, I have not read Unikrishnan as such, but I know only this much, that this proposition, reading Article 45 into the provision of Article 21, is the contribution. Rest, I'm not bothered. And in fact, this Unikrishnan case was later on overruled by the 11-judge bench in T.M. Pai Foundation case. I have done a critique on T.M. Pai from 2002. So I said it was a deeply divided decision, 6-5. I disagree with the majority decision. But nevertheless, this is the position which is stated therein. And this decision led to the awakening of the state. I use the word of dogmatic slumber. I come across as a student of law. It's a stone expression. Maybe that 60 years back, not less than that. But I liked it by passing the 86th Amendment of the Constitution, which introduced new Article 21A. The state shall provide free and compulsory education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 in such a manner as the state may by law determine. And new version of Article 45 that said shall endeavor to provide early childhood care and education for all children until they complete the age of 6 years. On a bare provision, what do you think that what the parliament has done? Have they promoted the interest of children? Pardon?
They have done away with the 10-year prescribed period.
One thing is very rightly pointed out. First thing that they have unshackled themselves with the provision of 10 years, and that too from the commencer, unko isko udai do. And what did he say? Okay, so as the law would provide, who would law provide? It is you who would provide. So you have freed them yourself from the responsibility which was entrusted upon you by the Constitution in the beginning. And then 93 Unikrishnan case, it took 10 years almost for the state to pass. And then it came into effect on 1st of April 2010. Another 10 years. Why is this gap of 10 years not there? The gap was there because the essential fructification of the constitutional mandate took place in 2009. The government and the Parliament of India enacted the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act 2009, known as the RTE Act 2009, that came into force with effect from April 1, 2010, providing right to education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years as their guaranteed enforceable fundamental rights by enabling them to seek admission in their neighborhood schools, whether those schools are government or government aided or purely private public schools. This constitutionality of this act was challenged by the three-judge bench. In a case, Society for Unaided Private Schools of Rajasthan versus Union of India. This was done on the ground that the provision of the act permitting children to seek free education to the extent of 30% of the caste strength, even with some compensatory provision by the state. State said that we will compensate you in their schools, violate their fundamental rights under Article 19(1)(g) of the Constitution, which guarantees them to carry on any occupation, trade, or business. Now, education, and this was the most sad contribution of the TMA file communities, because this question came in a big way. Okay, what is this education? Where is it for? Is it a trade? No. Commerce? No. They said at the best it is a kind of an occupation. So if you go to the classical Indian tradition, it was not even an occupation. It was a mission. It was a mission. It was not an occupation, it was a mission. It appears that we have, because it rhymes occupation and mission. So let's take it. This challenge was negated by the Supreme Court holding that Article 19(1)(g), read with Article 19(6) of the Constitution, permits the state to impose such condition which is absolutely reasonable, excepting the minority educational institution. Why did they accept? Because the judgment was beautiful. I found it was most reasonable. But when it comes to the minority education institution, instead of being reasonable, this judgment was delivered by reason of authority of 11 judgments. A reason of authority, not on the authority of reason. Rest of the judgment I found it was beautiful. I delivered a special lecture on this judgment. It was delivered on January 12, 2013. And sitting judge of the Supreme Court, Justice Major, was invited to chair the lecture. And Justice M.M. Kumar, who was the Chief Justice of J&K, who happened to be around in Chandigarh, he said, I would like to join. He said, most welcome. So he was acting as guest of honor. This lecture was published by the ILI, 2013, The Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act, 2009, a juridical critique of the constitutional perspective. I have argued that the three-judge bench of the Supreme Court excluded minority education institutions from the reach of the children belonging to poor sections of society, seemingly more on the authority of the 11-judge bench decision on TMA family rather than on the authority of reason. I have pleaded that by virtue of seeking state recognition, now this was my argument in 11-judge bench case, he said state has got nothing to do. He said, look here, any minority education institution would be considered as of any value if state does not recognize it. As the state recognition is the biggest contribution of the state. So how the minority education institution can claim that they are not getting anything from the state? They are getting the cream. They are getting the essence. And this fact, because it was an 11th judgment decision, ये उनके गले में अटकी रह गई है बात. इसको हम अभी undo नहीं कर पाए. Did a critique? I said 11 judge bench judgment. It was published again in ILI. I delivered a lecture, special lecture, under the aegis of the Indian Council of Social Science Research Center on May 24, 2003. This case dealt with sort of privately managed educational institution imparting professional education, especially in such fields as medicine, dentistry, engineering. In the state of Karnataka alone, for instance, out of 84 educational institutions, 67 were privately managed, charging hefty fees, and only 17 were managed by the government. On the basis of my analysis, I have submitted that the majority decision by the deeply divided court of 6-5 is requires reconsideration. Now I'm posing a cult and a critical poser. Cult and critical poser is that have we succeeded in providing free and compulsory education for all children till today? Notwithstanding the transformation of the provision of education from non-enforceable to enforceable rights. This is the question. Have we succeeded by converting non-transferable into an enforceable right? Have we succeeded? Instead of free and compulsory education, haven't we made education during the past 75 years of our independence increasingly a big commercial lucrative enterprise, notwithstanding the new national education policy operation during the past 2 years, that is since 2002. This is serious. Free and compulsory education. If you see the new education policy, I have carefully gone through it. They have started as if they have started from where the founding fathers of the Constitution began in 1950 and set 10 years. But the new education policy says that 2020 is the base year and give us 10 years. In 2030, you will produce the result. Now, my understanding is 10 years are slipping by. 2 years have already gone by. 8 years are left. Work is tremendous, providing free and compulsory education. What are we doing? An issue to ponder over now. Another issue. We may now look back in retrospect and ask de novo, why have the state hitherto failed to provide free and compulsory education for all children? This is the question which I'm saying. We have converted from non-enforceable to enforceable. Nothing happened. So the question is that where lies the basic flaw? So therefore, I'm raising a question which needs to reflect upon. And the best podium for reflecting upon is this capacity building program. Because we are supposed to question, not accepting anything as a gospel truth, you see. So have we succeeded? Has it ceased to be responsibility of the state? First thing was asked. Okay, nothing is happening. So this prompted me to pose a question that has it ceased to be responsibility of the state? I'm quoting the head of the state, not a politician, but head of the state, the governor, November 28, 2021. He said, no compromise on education and health. Health and education sectors are not a source of money. It's not a commercial enterprise. But two important pillars of human resource development which could neither be compromised nor traded. What does it mean? Neither be compromised nor traded. He is asking the government that education has to be provided And for this, there is no excuse, no trading. You cannot take the plea or alibi that, sorry, we are busy with coronavirus and so therefore we could not. We are busy of is meeting this kind of a, it has got nothing to do, you see. That priority has to be maintained. That priority has to be maintained. If we are not doing that, there is something basically wrong. So I'm quoting the observation of the head of the state in November 2021. Let me quote another head of the state in February 21, 2022. Education is government priority. State Lieutenant Governor of JNK, Manoj Sinha said, education and health of children are the biggest responsibility of administration. What do you mean by the biggest responsibility? All other responsibilities are pushed on the back burner. This is the first most prime responsibility of the state. But what we are doing, I'm quoting December 2021, due spending, private schools say won't admit EWS students. See, the government is issuing an order. The government said we will compensate you. That's all. And to that, their response was that until unless you deposit the dues. See, what is happening to our society, the private sector? What is happening? Have they lost all moorings, you see? Education is becoming a commercial enterprise, purely. December 23, 2021. Not enrolled by private schools. EWS students at the receiving end. Only 1% kids are enrolled. Only 272, less than 1% of 41,860 students have been given admission to private school under Rule 134A of the state of Haryana. You see, the state of Haryana has allocated the seats in each of the private schools to the extent of 41,860. And what the private school says, they could admit only 272. See what has happened to the authority of the state? Why the state has not been able to implement even this modest 30%. Basic flaw. What is that? Let's detect the basic flaw. Hitherto, we have failed to comprehend the underlying value of the statement made by the founding fathers of the Constitution, when under Article 37 of the Constitution, it is clearly and categorically stated that the provision contained in Part 4, including the provision relating to education, shall not be enforceable by any court of law, but the principles therein laid down are nevertheless fundamental in the governance of the country, and it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles in making use. I said, we have not. What is the basic flaw? We have not understood the value of Article 37. We have not understood the value of why these were made non-enforceable, not enforceable in the court. If so, what about the whole exercise of zealously undertaking transformation of a non-enforceable principle relating to education into an enforceable right? You see that, what is this? Zealously, I think we are taking pride, our Constitution, our Supreme Court, wonderful, they have done. They are making Parliament, oh, wonderful. They have provided free and compulsory education, 86th Amendment of the Constitution, beautiful. So all this exercise which have been so zealously undertaken, what does it mean? In my own view, it is the flawed understanding of the constitutional obligation of the state under Article 45 of the Constitution. It is the flawed understanding of this basic constitution. No, I am confining myself only to Article 45 throughout understanding about 45. I quote an observation of Chief Justice Ramana on July 3, 2022. Chief Justice Ramana, while addressing the Indian diaspora at an event organized by the Association of Indo-American in San Francisco, USA, said, I quote, as we celebrate 75th year of independence this year, and as our republic turned 72, with some sense of regret, see, what is this? With some sense of regret, I must add here that still we haven't learned to appreciate wholly the roles and responsibilities assigned by the Constitution to each one of the institutions. In his own assessment, I quote, this flawed thinking of all hues flourishes in the absence of proper understanding among the people about the Constitution and the functioning of the democratic institution. No, he is extending that. I was focusing only on 45. Not only on 45, it's about the whole gamut of constitutions. We have not understood. Why we have not understood? Why we have not understood? Unfortunately, I think we were reflecting on this serious question when an LLB student, I still remember. And at the time, that why I was working on the area of compensation and property rights, beginning in early 70s, 60s, 70s. And we were seeing the interpretation given by the Supreme Court. Probably the idea was varying around from a sociological school of jurisprudence. And that idea was that how can our judges who are trained typically in the Western tradition, and if they are not exposed to the history of freedom struggle, they would not be able to capture the spirit, you see. That was the like it. And I think in the early period, history or a constitutional history used to be one of the compulsory subjects, you see. Now, that has been ticked out. Is it what a practicing lawyer has got to do with it? And similar question I encountered as a founding director of Chandigarh Judicial Academy, because the responsibility was entrusted upon me to structure that how this, there is no straight work for you. You have to begin. I started working as an academician. My approach was different then than it was to be not. The question was that from where to bring the faculty to teach. This was again a question. If I will bring colleague from the university, I think in the university culture, we are given to a different kind of a culture, not in a judicial process making where you have to work very hard. If the judges to work very hard. If they don't want to work, that's a different thing. If you want to work, enormous work, enormous stress. You just can't imagine. But similarly, is on the teacher. The only fear is that in teaching situation, if you work, fine. If you don't want to work, again, it's your pleasure. You can get. So it depends upon the kind of a tradition which you would like to say. So one of the reasons maybe when Justice Ramana is making this kind of a statement, reflecting back, what could be the possible reason? Because after all, in social sciences, this is one of the characteristics of social sciences, that every meaning has to be contextual. Without context, it has got no meaning. That's why the kind of a debate that these are the unparliamentary words. The word itself has got no meaning. It would speak only in the context. Why this basic idea we have not been able to comprehend till today? We become mechanical. ये word आपने बोला है unparliamentary externals. It will lose its sense. I pose another question. Why did the founding fathers of our constitution place this subject of education within the ambit of directive principle of state policy instead of part 3 of the constitution? And again, coming back, हमारी जुडिशरी ने भी देख लिया, पार्लियामेंट्री भी देख लिया, उन्होंने सोचा कि शायद हमारे साल्वेशन जो है एक दफा इन्फोर्स कर देंगे, हमारी प्रॉब्लम खत्म हो जाएगी. But that we have seen, that has not fructified. Did the founding fathers make the subject of education not enforceable by inadvertent omission, which was later corrected by the Supreme Court by reading Article 45 in conjunction with Article 21 and the Parliament? So the Constitution, 86 amendments to the Constitution. My own understanding about the placing and the purpose of Article 45 is at variance. What is my understanding? That this placing in part 4, it was by design and not by default. It was by design, not by default. Then exploratory question again. What was the design in making the subject of free and compulsory education non-enforceable for all children up to the age of 14? What was that design? What was that design? No, there's a top priority, no trading, no compromise. No compromise. For financial situation, you can build palacious houses and you can afford to build a new parliament, you can afford to. What about education? It's not the financial constraint. It's not the financial constraint. So what was that design? What is that design?
So I think it was coming from Tilak's presentation, that education will free us all.
My own answer. Vis-a-vis children, the state was considered in the position of what is termed as patria potesta in Roman law, which is a Latin term, which literally means the power of a father over the children in the family, which in Roman law was conceived as the fundamental principle of Roman society. Rome was not built in a day. The fundamental principle of Roman society. And Karta of the joint family in the classical tradition of Hindu law, which is acclaimed as the oldest category of any known system of. Now, this perspective, I have just cited my own article published in the Oxford International Encyclopedia, Legal History. I don't know how they have approached me, though I'm not a specialist in any way. But they asked me to write a small piece, and it has to be of not more than 3,000 words, not even a word more. And they said they would pay you for each word, but not more than 3,000. They would pay you handsome. But nevertheless, I did a piece which somehow or other became acceptable to the editorial board. Now, the idea was that this piece I wrote with a total comprehension of what I have learned right from beginning, from a formative period, life spent in Gurukul. How do I conceive, you see? So the whole institution of Karta of the family, now in the modern society, our dialogue has got stuck. Between patriarchal society and matriarchal society. Said Roman society was not built in a day, and their fundamental principle was now in the same Indian setup, the power of a Karta was huge. In Dharma Shastras, they have meticulously reproduced that these are the duties of the king, these are the duties of the subject, these are the. But when it's come to the power of the Karta, Do you know? There is no breakdown. Karta was most powerful, and we have seen in his own lifetime, Karta has the power if there are three children, which child has to go to England to become a barrister, which child has to look after the land, and which child has to look after. And it worked very well. It worked very well until unless the British regime came and they destroyed the basic fundamentals. You remember I think, if I recall now, one of the grievous acts which changed the whole complexion of our joint family system was the Hindu Gains of Learning Act of 1930. Hindu Gains of Learning. You see, prior to that, all members of the family, each member would contribute according to his own capacity, and each one would get according to his own needs. No, this was the understanding among the members of this family, and it has worked well. But now, Britishers came, they did not understand the implication of that. They said, how come if I am a creator of the family, of its property, I have got the right to destroy it? Consumerism, totally it's mine, and so therefore I can. In Hindu joint family system, can you imagine that the immovable property was inalienable? Immovable property could not be alienated. The person cannot say that I am the creator of this property. Well, good, but you cannot destroy it. And only its destruction was there, remember? Kutumbarte, Atmarte, Dharmarte. That's all, only three exceptions. For the purposes of family, or to beat a catastrophic situation, or for charity. I mean, this was the concept. How the Britishers could understand that? But they have not understood. So my only response is that it is this concept which we have not been able to complete. There are at least two related basic premises for my assertion. When do I say that go back to the position of the state is that of a karta of a big family. Position of the state is that of a karta of a big family. Because Dr. Chanchal Kumar Singh was very specific that we have to think that what kind of a lesson, when I told him that this is my topic, I could see instantly, he said, sir, it's very good. It's very good. This is what we needed. Haven't you, sir? I hope I'm not misquoting this. So I think this was the obligation which his approval made me more serious about it, that I have to break this. So therefore, when I say that state is in the position of a karta, why do I say? So I have got two basic premises. One, the state in the position of a patria potestas, to be read as karta in the Indian setup, was bound to fulfill the constitutional mandate to provide free and compulsory education for all children without the need of invoking the interventional provision of access to justice, which means access to justice for getting access to court for getting justice from the state. This is one reason. This is one reason. Two, the usage of the concept of duty under Article 37 is of crucial significance. It obviates the need for constrained access to justice in respect of education in terms of enforceable rights at the instance of children, as duties of the state are to be fulfilled ipso facto, that is, without any intervention from. Lesson to be learned from the Indian classical tradition. We need to learn to construe the status of state under Article 45 of the Constitution as the karta of a big family, who understands the primacy of education in building new India, and therefore does not require any prodding from outside, and thereby completely subsuming the notion of access to justice. In short, it is non-appreciation of this basic premise, non-appreciation of this basic premise that access to justice in respect to education is inherent in duty, dharma of the state, as stated in Article 37. Article 37 says it shall be the duty of the state, it shall be the duty of the state to implement these principles in their lawmaking. Duty of the state. As hitherto happened, been causing an upheaval in the realm of education. It has made us lost the primacy of education in nation building. What is the primacy? Primacy of education in British as the most powerful tool of governance in their political harmony. I just quote a statement of Tony Blair, a distinguished British Labour statesman who won the election in 1997, 2001, 2005. Blair was the Labour Party's longest serving Prime Minister. He said, I quote, and that he said in 1996. He said, ask me my three main priorities of the government. And I'll tell you, first priority, education. Second priority, education. Third priority, education. But what we are doing now, today, July 10th, we are reporting from Karnal. 4 years on, government school yet to get own building. It is run in a Ravidas Dharamshala. Only 2 teachers, and that too on deputation, to accommodate 165 students of 5 classes, teaching all subjects, no toilets, no drinking water facilities. Chandigarh Tribune, July 10. Special kids have fundamental rights to elementary education. It was added by the High Court that every child had a fundamental right to elementary education. The state was duty bound to provide the same in accordance with the provision. Do you decipher the plot? When the High Court is holding that it is the fundamental right and it is the duty of the state, we decipher the catch, we catch the flaw in it. How the term duty is being used, that is the duty of the state to provide. Duty here is used not in the concept of dharma. Duty is used as a correlative to right. The Western jurisprudence, my right is your duty. My right is your duty. Your right is my duty. So rights and duties are correlative. In the classical tradition, they were able to get out of this, you see. What is the basic flaw? Basic flaw is that my right would remain incomplete until you fulfill your duty. But in the Hindu classical tradition, Indian classical tradition, what was your right? Not that they were not aware of the concept of right. What was the concept of right in the Indian classical tradition? Concept of right was that you have got a right and that your right is to perform your own duty. You've got a right, your right is to perform your own duties. Now, this was the concept. This is what we have saying. We just like parrot like, this is the fundamental right of the fundamental, this is the duty of the state, without realizing what this duty means. I am quoting July 13. Haryana came from EWS student fares poorly, only 6% seats are sought. A scheme initiated by the Haryana government, which provides for free education to economically weaker sections children in private school from class 2 to class 12. has evoked a tepid response. Read this statement which I'm reading. Only 1,470 applications have been received against 24,987 seats reserved under this scheme in 381 private schools across the state. This comes to just only 6% of the total seats. My question here is, why only 1,470 applications have been received against 24,000 seats reserved for the economically weaker sections of society under this state scheme? Or simply, why the facility provided by the state to economically weaker section of society is not available? Now, I'm posing a serious question. इन्होंने तो इश्तिहार लेकर के कह दिया कि देखो हम कितना काम कर रहे हैं आपके लिए, हम इतनी स्कॉलरशिप एकदम इन वन को दिया कर दी। अरे तुम्ही लोग जो इस वक्त को इस्तेमाल नहीं कर रहे, ये तुम्ही लोग जो इसको इस्तेमाल नहीं कर, इस वजह से तुम्ही लोग। So I am posing a question. The answer to this question lies embedded in construing and comprehending the meaning of the expression free and compulsory education under Article 45 of the Constitution. It is this you are missing. What is that? It is the bounden duty of the state as karta of the family. Ayush, this is an important slide. I would not like you to miss. So you have missed the context slightly, and out of context, probably it is difficult to understand. It is the bounded duty of the state as karta of the family, not only to make free provision of education for EVS students, but also, now this is an important part, but also to persuade them to the extent of making it compulsory for all children to join the portals of education, because it is education and education alone that can salvage the situation of poverty, illiteracy, ignorance. Conclusion. This is my last slide. I would like you to be carefully go with me. Although it may sound ironic or even contradiction, and yet I assert is factually and functionally true that it is education which will strengthen the course of access to justice rather than vice versa. Should I read it again? That it is education which may strengthen the course of access to justice rather than vice versa. That's why our founding fathers had made education a non-enforceable constitutional phenomenon, and thereby obviating the need of resorting to the frills of access to education through the intervention of courts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a wonderful lectures and connection between education and access to justice. Now, we would like to invite questions from the audience, from participants and teachers, scholars.
Yes.
My name is Sam.
Thank you.
It's an honor to and a pleasure to have you here, sir. Very pertinent question you raised, and the best part about a teacher who's so an erudite himself answers it. And you know, sir, what the thing that you said has also been put through a movie, which is called Hindi Medium, where given this EWS scheme, parents from influential families would go and stay in the slum areas in order to ensure the admission of their children to good school under this EWS scheme. And there, this entire conspiracy that how it does not work in private school is shown. It's shown that the principal says, irrespective of the fact that you get these students in our school, they will never find a conducive atmosphere to continue with such education. Within a period of like 2 to 3 months, they feel so uncomfortable that they'll walk out of it. That's the thing, that if we impose. So my question, I know it's very philosophical in context, but a man with your knowledge and wisdom can only answer. So why, and because the entire debate on right to education does not focus on quality education. Why we as a country has failed to provide education which could enlighten the mind of youth and giving him a clear understanding of what is right and what is wrong.
I think you have touched to the core issue. And it is the core issue we have to reflect collectively. It is not only a monopoly of an individual to, it needs to be a collective percolation of this idea. First thing is that somehow or other, which he has said, it's a reality that even a family living in slum area, he would aspire to provide quality education, and his perception of quality education is going to an English medium school. She is so right. And this is not a phenomenon which is confined to the lower strata. I may reflect in a higher register. We have got one daughter. We raised it, and myself and my wife said, which school we should? Both of us said very seriously, and we said that we would like to send her to the government school. And what was that reason? My wife gave a very telling example. She's a medical doctor by profession, and she was in the government, but since I being in the university, so she left the government service and joined the university, Punjab University, so that both of us stay put at the same place. Now she says that as a medical doctor, he says, when a child comes for treatment, and if he's a product of a public school, he would not understand even about the ailment or the kind of a prescription which is. And if a slightly grown-up child comes with other 2 children as an escort, he would understand each and everything, and he would see it is translated. And a public school product, he said, I don't know. This is the kind. So I thought that what lesson do we derive? What kind of education we would like to provide? So we decided to send it. Now our colleague came, said, "Sir, Dr. Sahab, aap ye kya kar rahe ho?" So I would curiously say, "Bhai, हम बड़े स्कूल की फी हम पे नहीं कर सकते, बहुत ज्यादा है। इस स्कूल में देखिए, tuition fee is free, and to girls go every 6 months after, you get a bunch of exercises which are also free. So but basic idea was that we wanted to have an exposure what is happening in society. And this private school, the government schools, they are all stratas mixed together, some good, bad. So therefore, now the question is that how this mental makeup that a good education is available only in English medium school, or it is a good education which make a person, if you are educated. I think this is not true. Is it? Until 10th class, my all education was in Hindi and Sanskrit. English I learned for the first time in matriculation. In matriculation, there I have to appear formally in the examination. I got a book from the market, Teach Yourself from Hindi to English. Khadi babri babri ki क्या होती थी, And we learned, you see. And then we followed the prescription of our teacher. We'll go to teacher and say, कि सब कैसे अंग्रेजी कैसे सीखी कि सब एक तो प्रोनाउंसिएशन सीखना हो तो रेडियो को सुनो न्यूज़पेपर को सुनो एडिटोरियल पढ़ो you believe it I did throughout my life I did and within 6 months or 8 months I started getting the workable knowledge of English and then had the privilege of studying in one of the best universities in Canada, that is the University of Toronto, which is ranked in first 10 universities of the world. Do you believe that the education which I received in Gurukul, I find an echo of the same principle there? Faith, understanding, realization. It was so powerful, just continuous. And then, I think nobody told me that, sorry, you lack the comprehension in English, or you cannot express this idea. So much so, a chapter of my thesis, I did on Canadian constitutional law. After I finished my work on Canadian, our teacher asked me, he said, you going back to India? He said, what would be the good of this study to the Indian setup? And so therefore you kindly write a separate chapter of your part of your thesis. So I did a chapter in which I have to bring in the Indian philosophy, and at that time, and it continues for a long time, one of the leading authority on Hindu law, you know who was it? It was JDM Derritt. JDM Derritt. His statements are quoted by the Supreme Court. Quoted by the Supreme Court. Quoted by the Supreme Court. So, Canadian University sent that thesis along with that chapter to Professor JDM Derritt. And JDM Derritt said that, but this is the first time I'm an examiner from a Canadian university, and that too from University of Toronto, and that too about an Indian student. And he said in his report, this I'm sharing with you because faculty shared that report with me. He said, Indian writers write as if they are the first writers in the field. And here is a gentleman, if he has quoted a phrase which is not his own, that has also been duly acknowledged in the footnote. So he said there are two possible conclusions. Either this Indian is a big cheat, or it has been transformed into a different culture. So my faculty, because it was a constitutional law, and I am the first Asian to receive this degree in 1973. The last degree was awarded in 1954. Because their idea of giving a doctoral degree was not just it was a tool of enlightenment. It was a process of enlightenment. So therefore, to say that it is the English which per se, ipso facto, would provide a qualitative education, this is not true. But then, who is to remove this kind of thing? If this is the kind of feeling, I think we have to share. We have to share. We have to share. We have to tell them. I said, all right, you write a piece. I'm not given a background of a public school. Write a piece. Engage in conversation. Engage into an idea. It is this kind of a discourse is missing. That's why I said I quoted the statement of Professor Avijit Pathak of JNU. He said we are loathsome and critical. This is not happening. So I think it is not only confined to this, it is a larger section. The larger section. But then it's not difficult. Difficult is because it's a long-term planning. You can't see the result instantly. It's a pervasive phenomenon. So we have to Yes.
Apart from my ignorance, you talked about right to education and you said another fundamental aspect, right to health.
Yes, okay.
I am a assistant professor who's been given LLM subject like health policy. So, pardon my ignorance, but I mean, will we get a chance to hear you on right to health as well? Because this will simplify work for an assistant professor like me who's just a beginner, sir.
Rest assured that I would be, but then for that you have to give me time because I have to become a pupil of my wife, you see. Only then I can. I did try once because PGI has asked me, all of a sudden, there was a shortage of a critical speaker. And a day before, they approached me. They said, can you help me? So I instantly said that, कुछ कहना होगा तो कह देंगे. Then my wife immediately said, he said, what kind of commitment have you made? You know, a bit of it, you see. I said, you are there to teach me. So and she taught me and she prepared me. And do you know what was the result? The participant said that this is one of the lecture we have. This is one of the lecture we have. So I think it's a question of working upon it. Chacha Kumar has made me to work on access to justice. I have never done it. And though I have heard murmurs number of times that there are workshops and so, but I never. But then maybe good for me that I have not, at this age, I would like to reflect, meditate, rather than reading, because I have read enough, you see. बहुत पढ़ लिया है. उसको सोचो, आत्मसात करो. So I think this is the one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have also a few questions. I was figuring out what is the purpose of education? To discipline, to blur our mind, to meditate, or to simply be a part of herd, a kind of masses who does not have a voice or reasoning to contemplate and articulate. Because in modern society, we say education as a resource, human as a resource. So it is a commodification of education, commodification of human being, is a kind of ecology prevalent in our society. So I would like to know from your side, what is your perspective?
I think you have raised a very
For a long time. So, this is a very all pray to this so this is the first point, and I had done my thesis on simplicity. And I found only one word under Article 41, old age. So I say that education and old age, like has been framed with a mindset that as we know. Constitution may say, frame the area. And they know this is how to say at that time art situation. तो हमारा perception by before independence we can blame for the victim, but after independence before
see when you are caught in two streams. So it's some time, but then nevertheless, I'm not a person who would run away. That's for sure. One thing is that you have raised very important ideas. I wish it would have been sharing with our student, and I'm sure that since you have raised this question, you must be raising similar kind of a question with your students as well. There is no escape from it. See, first thing is that education is a very comprehensive term. And the component of education, components, but those components again come together. You have mentioned that is the purpose of discipline. No, in the formative period, do you know what was the behavior? In a Gurukul, far from the madding crowd, you are taught to learn with the minimum of things. For example, we were just on the 2 pairs. Dresses, crown, shaven head, and early in the morning at 4 o'clock, winter, and then you have to sit down flat, do exercise. No, this was the whole life was like a tick of a clock. Now, what was this discipline which has helped me immensely? And then I'm reflecting back. As I said, I went to the University of Toronto in 1969 for my doctoral degree. And I did my LLM from Punjab University by studying first in the university. And University of Toronto admitted me to the doctoral program. When I went there, they admitted me to the master's program. I said that I've come here for doctoral program. So my dean told me that we don't admit to the doctoral program straight away because it's a very restricted program. And we admit him to the LLM program. And the LLM program, we see the progress. If it is good, we would say, all right, go ahead. And if it is not, we will give you an LLM degree and say thank you. So I said that if that is the purpose, why don't you assess me? This I must say, the flexibility of education system, which we don't have here. He said it's all right, we can do that. He immediately constituted a 3-member committee, 3 professors. He said they would assess me. And what they did, they formulated a topic for me. And it was a private intervention. And gave me 6 months to produce a law review form of article, proper footnote, as if it is in a publishing form, with reference to 5 points, 1, 2, 3, 4. And one of the first point was a comprehensive judgment of the House of Lords, which was delivered 69. So they said in private intervention, I said that private intervention law I never studied. In LLB, it was an option, public intervention, and I have not studied. And so therefore, can I write on? Absolutely, currently, they said, no, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Now, I was caught in my own bed. Now, this I'm quoting because this is what I did read. My own Gurukul training. Now, I started reading, and those 3 professors were experts in private internationals. Each one of them had produced a book or an authentic article, original article, and article being you have to have something original, not. So they were very choosy about this work. I could never say, in my opinion. Oh my gosh, it's a very strong. In my opinion, being that it is the first time you are saying so, and nobody else ever had. So they were very careful about it. And whenever I start reading, my mind would say that I would never be able to do it. I would never succeed. Now then I applied my Gurukul training. It was raining, snowing outside. If I'm not able to concentrate myself, I would order, put in a snowshoe, go out, have a round of the block, and then come back. I would faithfully put on my shoes and go. And then I'll come back and would start reading the same page. Now it started making sense. And within 3 months, I was able to learn the basic fundamentals and was able to reach a stage where I can contribute something of my own. And then I started reading the judgment of the House of Lords. And it was to be of a 30-page. And after doing a work for about 4 months, would you believe that I crossed about 50 pages? So I went to one of my teachers in whom I had the utmost trust, faith, understanding, realization, utmost faith. So I went to him and said, "Sir, I'm not aware about the standards of this university. I have prepared a draft. Would you kindly advise me whether I'm proceeding on the right line, whether it is somewhere coming nearer to the standard which you expect from me?" And he said, "Leave it." And after 2 days, he called me. But I never mind about 4 points, you see. Please get it done finally. Finally. And did it. And lo and behold, on the basis of single article, they said, "You are exempted from this course, you are exempted from this course, and you are admitted to the doctoral program with a retrospective effect from the date you joined the." Now, the point which I am saying here is that education is a big comprehension. It is those teachers, what I learned from Gurukul, those teachers in the University of Toronto were there to teach me this same lesson. So don't think that the basic philosophical principles of education are distinct from Indian classical tradition, from their tradition. They are manifestations of tradition. So first thing is education discipline. But discipline nahi hai. And once the discipline comes, then you are able to make use of it, you see. You would go to its understanding. Understanding, realization. What is the difference? Understanding, realization. 3 stages. Realization means an Indian teacher would tell you that this is the course which I followed in my life. Human, okay? Now, he is not saying that follow it blindly. What he's saying, if I use the terminology of science, he says, this is just like an hypothesis. Now, this hypothesis you have to verify yourself. Until you verify it, nothing would fructify. Now, realization was that you have to realize realization. But the touch of realization, that it becomes an integral part of your thought and action. Integral part of your thought. So, education teaches you to accomplish, make an endeavor until you succeed. And when you teach, what is the importance? I often engage my students on this count to see. He said, teaching, learning, it must make you happy instantly. If it does not, I tell you it is not worth it. I would tell them the examples. I said, such and such person. He was my friend. He said, man, बस प्रैक्टिस कर ली है, बहुत तंग आ गए, अगर मैं जज बन जाऊं तो जज बन गए. थोड़ी देर के बाद वो जज सब कम से कम स्टेट का चीफ जस्टिस तो बन गए. चीफ जस्टिस बन गए. अब चीफ जस्टिस बन गए तो जब तक सुप्रीम कोर्ट ना पहुंचे जाए तब तक वो चीफ जस्टिस का क्या. And happily, that student also became the chief justice. I'm speaking of Justice Jagdish Kher. He was my student. So, and if I would meet him after becoming season, it's like, क्या हाल है आपका? मेरी गुजर रही है, इनका बहुत अच्छे गुजर रही है. So therefore, education does not prepare only for a profession. Something more. It prepares you for a profession which you will continue to enjoy ever after. Grandma की story क्या कहते थे? Oh, they lived happily ever afterwards, not a transitory, ever afterwards. So I think the purpose of education is also to prepare you for a profession, but there is nothing like that. But ultimately, it must prepare you for the life journey. And which I feel that now I am retired more than 20 years back. I still enjoy it. And it is you people who make the teaching learning. So it is comprehensive. It is not an isolation. Education is anything and everything would be included with the ambit of education. Anything, everything would be included. How you treat with your child, how do you treat your spouse, how do you treat your colleague, how do you appreciate the other's predicament. So what part of education? So it is this kind of a discourse is often missing. आजकल क्या commercialization की totally the biggest menace is commercialization. From where would you learn from a teacher? If you think, okay, you are giving me because I give you the money for it. Tick tick of a clock, out your time is up because you paid. So what do you now? Have I answered your question? So what is education?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I'll request the participants that we'll continue with the questions. Sir is here tomorrow as well. Sir is here tomorrow as well. So some of the questions which have remained untaken today will be taken tomorrow. And on that note, आधा धन्यवाद सर आज कर रहे हैं, आधा धन्यवाद कल करेंगे. But very importantly, वो जिन्होंने कुछ नहीं बोलकर सब कुछ बोल दिया. A big round of applause for ma'am who is here with us today. Thank you so much, ma'am. And on that note, sir, thank you so much. And we look forward to the next session tomorrow. And a pleasant stay with us, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Chanchal, for giving me the privilege.
Have queries, no queries, sir.
Well, oh, no problem. No problem on my count.
Sir is as flexible as University of Toronto.
Kindly have good tea and quickly assemble. Be punctual. There are two people.
Yeah.
After which,
None after now.
You guys for Pirimila.
Ages.
Well, I think it is you who has made me to.
It was you for orientation.
So we should have.